Right. Good morning. Thank you, worship team. Appreciate that. I love it how God has gifted and equipped people so differently. It's fascinating. You know, if you see an expert in something that you don't know anything about, it's awe-inspiring, right? Even if you do know about it. It's cool. So thank you for doing that. We're going to read something out of, we're going to study Moses, right?
Yeah, Moses.
So we're going to read the Old Testament, right?
No. We're going to be looking at Hebrews 11, 23 through 29. Hebrews 11, 23 through 29, and I don't know what page it is in your Bible, so you'll have to find it.
There it is.
There you go, page 1008, Hebrews 11, 23 through 29. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith the people crossed the Red Sea on dry land, but when the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned.
Interesting. Thank you. Toby's got this habit of always finding something in the New Testament when we're talking about Moses. I actually told him that, but anyway. It's a nice summary of Moses' life in Hebrews 11, so thanks, Toby, for doing that. Anyway, this is Grace Life Bible Church. We are resilient disciples who experience God's grace, and we extend it. So here's your quiz. On the slide, I have 3 words, and you have to think, what order do those words come in? The 3 words are believe, behave, and belong. What comes first? So here it is. In the performance posture of the Pharisees and many people today, the order is, well, first you have to believe like us, then you have to behave like us, and only after you've mastered those things, maybe we'll let you belong with us. And you can feel that. You hold, a distance, falling short, I'm not good enough, I can't figure this out. Jesus' posture is different. He has, the order is, belong with me, be with me. Matthew, the crooked tax collector who's robbing people, come with me, be with me. And then after being with Jesus for a while, believe in him. And then we behave like him. But that creates some tension because people aren't always looking good. We have to just deal with that, right? And that's anyway, I just love that thing. That's just kind of a good mental check for me to make sure I'm thinking about those things in the right way. Anyway, so that's who we are. Welcome. What do you do with dead ends? What do dead ends mean? I have to confess, just a moment of vulnerability here. When I see a sign that says dead end, I'm like, well, that's for simple-minded people. I'll find a way. And sometimes I do. Sometimes I get stuck, but anyway. But what do road closed signs, dead end signs, what do they mean? And what do you do with those when it's not just a physical road, but when it's an emotional road, a financial road, something just doesn't work? God seems to trap you in this cul-de-sac, and there's no way out. What's our response then? How do we do that? So this is the story of Moses. Moses is growing in faith, and if you've been with us the past 2 weeks, you hopefully have seen a different perspective, I think a more full, a balanced perspective of Moses. He's not just a hero who does neat things. He struggles. He is not a polished, perfect product. He has good days, bad days. He whines about, God, I don't want to do this. And slowly he grows in faith. And today we're going to see him really take some leaps and steps, growing in faith, growing in godliness. But it's not easy. And so that's his experience, and that's our experience too. So Moses thought he was the prince of Egypt, and he thought, well, yeah, it makes sense that God would use me. Of course, God is smart, and so God's going to use me because I'm awesome, and this is why he's put me on the planet. And after he had 40 years of the wisdom of Egypt poured into his head, and it looks like God is like, yeah, we're going to have to deconstruct that, and that takes the next 40 years. So Moses goes from Moses, the extraordinary prince of Egypt, to Moses, the ordinary shepherd of some other guy's flocks in faraway Midian. Interesting, isn't it? So that's kind of where we're going. So we're talking about Moses. I found this. This is kind of fun. He's fishing. So if you're looking online or not looking online, it's just a river, and Moses part of the sea, so his buddy doesn't catch any fish. Anyway, so Moses does not run, or God does not run away from runaways. He transforms them. So we're doing a little mini series. This is the last Sunday of that about runaways. We did Jonah and Moses. So God doesn't run away from runaways. He transforms them. So Moses goes from fearing and running away, having misunderstood God's plan, to leading the people. And I love that. So we're going to take a quick review. 2 Sundays ago, we covered the first 40 years of Moses' life. He was an extraordinary prodigy in an extraordinary nation of Egypt, doing extraordinary things. And he thought, I'm extraordinary. Of course God would use me. This is great. And he goes on, and he was probably adopted by this woman. Her name is Hatshepsut. Anyway, she needs to buy a vowel, right? Hard to say that. But anyway. So here's a key verse that I'm kind of camping out on. Moses was instructed, this is Acts 7:22, he was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in word and deed. Dynamite, mighty in word and deed. And so we're going to get into some historically verifiable mighty deeds that Moses did. It will blow your minds, and it will be fun, okay? So he does that, but then when he's 40 years old, he wants to visit his brothers. Seeing one of them wronged, he defended him and killed him. And I love this line here, Acts 7:25. He supposed his Hebrew brothers would understand that God was giving them salvation by his hand. But they did not understand. And so he has to hightail it out of there, and he has to leave. And so that's the first 40 years of his life. The next 40 years, last Sunday, he's in Midian. He fled to Midian, and he took up residence with a Midianite priest. Now, the chief god that they worship in Midian is Baal. As you go down the Old Testament, it just is a nasty place with a lot of idolatry and a couple specific examples of how they really harmed Israel. And anyway, he's shepherding not his own flock, just some other guy's flock. He marries a woman named Zipporah. She's wife number 2. I'll explain, okay? He marries Zipporah. He meets after 40 years of just hanging. He probably thought that was his new normal life. I'm just going to be a shepherd here. This is my whole life. And then the burning bush, go back to Egypt. And but I can't. I don't want to. And that whole thing. So he goes back, okay? He goes back to Egypt. And when he goes back to Egypt, while he's in Midian here, this is Midian, good luck doing shepherding or anything there. It's a desert area. But Moses becomes officially part of Jethro's Midianite family, and that's a problem because he has distanced himself from the covenant community, from Yahweh's presence, Yahweh's knowledge. There's no evidence he even knows or follows Yahweh until he meets him at the burning bush, and that's the beginning of him growing in faith, and so we see that. That's encouraging, okay? So, all right, it looks like when God calls Moses, he's 80 years old. He is not at the top of his game. He's old, he's rusty, you know. It looks like God is late, but God is never late. He's never early. He arrives precisely when he means to, right? So that's good. But from Moses' perspective, God looks late, but we need to remember that he's never late, okay? Okay, and so this next one, it's the sequence is a little bumpy, but on the way to Egypt, Zipporah goes with him, but then a part of Moses detaching from his Midianite family and reattaching to Yahweh was sending Zipporah home. So he sent Zipporah home. The word sent kind of means divorce in other areas. So it's kind of a clean, go back home. I'm going to just focus on Yahweh and the Hebrew people. And they go the 10 plagues, the Red Sea, all that stuff. And then they leave. And then at Sinai, on the way out, Jethro and Zipporah come back, and he welcomes them because Jethro has converted. Jethro says, now I know the Lord is greater than all gods. And so that's why at one time he sends them away, the other time he welcomes them back because they have shifted. And now Jethro and Zipporah are underneath the Israelite community worshiping Yahweh. So that's an important distinction there. And that leads us then to today. Moses, the last 40 years of his life, the 80 to 120-year-old Moses. This is growing and godly Moses, wandering, and a whole bunch of growing faith things here, the 10 plagues, the Red Sea, and some leadership things we're going to get into that. But I love it that Moses doesn't march into Egypt with a whole bunch of Black Hawk helicopters and cruise missiles and fancy things. He doesn't have an elaborate plan. He could, because he was a military general for Egypt, right? He fought Cush, Ethiopia, won. I'll explain some of that too. But anyway, he doesn't march into Egypt with a military. He limps into Egypt with a stick. And that's the first sign that, okay, Moses he's growing in faith. Because if you do that, there's a sign that you have some faith, right? Because that's not in the plan for most military strategy, okay? His confidence is in God's. And the 10 plagues, I don't have time to get into this, but the 10 plagues, each of the 10 plagues are targeted at a specific Egyptian god. Now, have you ever thought, there's 10 plagues. Why not just one? Anytime you're reading the Old Testament and blah, 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 and there was a plague, you don't like, just one? Well, that's kind of lame. You don't think that. I mean, a plague is okay, but 10 of them, because each plague is directed at showing Yahweh is more powerful than Hapi, the god of the Nile, than Heket, the goddess as a woman with a frog head. Must have been a cultural thing. But anyway, Set, the god of lice and the god of flies and disease and all these things, boils and hail, Nut, the sky goddess, locust, darkness, and finally death, because Pharaoh's firstborn was considered a god. And so to the Egyptian people, this was how this was supposed to work. They have been in Egypt. They're aware of all these gods and the polytheistic culture. And Yahweh is showing them, I am more powerful than any and all of these gods here in Egypt. And when you leave and cross a political, geographical boundary, I will be more powerful than whatever gods you run into. But remember, in this culture, they kind of tied a god to a political, geographical place. And that's where they went wrong, because they crossed over a boundary. And they're like, oh, well, now, obviously those gods aren't here. Some other gods are here. And then when they crossed the boundary into Canaan, they thought, well, Yahweh was the God of the desert. That's where he really showed up. But now we're here in the Canaan area, and Baal is... So that's how... It's just their thought, the way their world worked, kind of made it hard for them to see who God was, what he was doing. But that's what's going on then. All right. So my point is, God was growing Moses' faith by teaching him theology, that I am more powerful anywhere, any God, and that was a new thought to them, okay? Another thing, if you have your Bible, go to Exodus 14. I'm going to kind of spell out a dead end here. Exodus 14, the first 4 verses. Just another little snapshot that Moses is growing in leadership. Exodus 14, 1 through 4. The Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel, so they're running, they're fleeing Egypt. Tell the people of Israel, turn back and camp in the front of Pi-Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Beth or Baal Zephon. You shall camp facing it by the sea. Now, you're like, blah, blah, blah words or whatever, okay? But what this is a geographical dead end. I mean, you can't go escape if Pharaoh's army comes at you the way you came. That's the only way, okay? So they're kind of trapped. And then God goes on, for Pharaoh will, verse 3, Pharaoh will say of the people, they're wandering in the land, and the wilderness has shut them in. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. He will pursue them. I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. And they did so. Do you have any idea how hard that would be? I mean, you're running for your life. Sure, you saw the 10 plagues, but you're like, could there be an 11th miracle, or are we done? Because now you're camping at this dead end, and you're like, if I go in here, I'm not coming out, Lord, unless you show up. And they did so. They went, and they camped out there, and so this dead end, I think it's amazing. And plus then, they start to see the Egyptians come. The people, they lose their ever-loving mind. They freak out and start complaining. They've been complaining forever. They're professional complainers. They just complain. And Moses is feeling that weight, and we'll uncover that as we go. So Moses trusts God's plan, his dead-end plan, but the people don't. And so, sure enough, verse 10, Pharaoh drew near, the people lifted their voice, cried out. This is great. Look at verse 11. They cried out to Moses, is it because there's no graves in Egypt that you've taken us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing it out of Egypt? Look at this. Verse 12. Is this not what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. Man, leave us alone. We're just going to serve the Egyptians. That's who we are. That's our role in this big universal plot of mankind. Lost all perspective. Interesting. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. And then, just picture your Moses, right? I mean, it's not been an easy road. Sure, the 10 plagues, the Red Sea, but now you're camped, you're stuck, you're trapped, and the people are freaking out, and they speak of stoning him. He feels that weight, and this is what he says. This is an amazing leadership moment for Moses. Verse 13. Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians who you see, you'll never see again." Verse 14, "The Lord will fight for you. You only have to be silent." So Moses is now at a place where he's like, okay, I'm okay camping at the dead-end trap. And the people aren't, but Moses is like, hang in there, fear not, stand firm, look for the salvation of the Lord, and just shut up. Stop complaining. That's kind of what he's saying, right? And so I love that. Those 4 statements: fear not, stand firm, look for his salvation, and be quiet. So Moses has led the people. He sees certain death, and yet he has faith. He knows God will deliver them, and that's fantastic, okay? So it's an opportunity for Moses to teach them faith, and anytime we are in a dead end, it's an opportunity for us to take that step of faith and say, Lord, I'm going to stop, because we're tempted to run around, right? And he says, stand firm. Don't frantically run around and try to solve everything. Fear not. I'm afraid, so I'm going to run faster. Just yesterday, I was driving someplace, and I think I turned on a wrong way road or something, and so I went faster. And Donna just laughs. Oh, of course, going the wrong way, just go faster. Anyway, but when we make a wrong move, sometimes we just want to go faster. And Moses is like, just stop. Just don't be afraid. Just stand firm and wait. You be still and know I'm the Lord, and wait for him to show up, okay? So that's what's going on here, all right? So why does God put us in dead ends? Situations where it looks hopeless, difficult, and that tendency to complain and freak out and to run fast instead of just rest and wait. Why does God do that? Because we're like Moses. We think we're extraordinary. We think we have amazing training and talents and ability and history and heritage and whatever else we do, pile on that truck. And it takes a dead end to strip that from us and God to take us from extraordinary in our own eyes into ordinary. And we're extraordinary in the fact that God loves us infinitely and he died for us. We're extraordinary in that, okay? But I'm talking about just navigating the world. I am not the hero of my story. I'm not supposed to be the hero of my story, but sometimes I end up as the hero of my story, and I become like Moses. Well, of course, it makes sense for God to use me. Of course. God is pretty smart. That's why you're right? And I'm not the only one, I know. But anyway, and so we go there. Our culture has a self-celebrating view of everything. We have a self-celebrating view of work, recreation, of money, success, family, competition, creativity, of our rights. Self-celebrating is just hardwired into our cultural DNA. And if we don't attend to that and take God's word and go, wow, Lord, where am I thinking I'm extraordinary? And where would you like to show me that I can just fear not? I can stand still, stand firm, and look for you and relish being ordinary. And just what will you do through me as I trust in you? There's a lot of freedom in that, okay? So then we get to chapter 12 in Numbers. So I'm hopping and skipping around. So Numbers 12, you got to go there. I'll give you a minute or two. A couple seconds, actually. But anyway, Numbers 12, 1 and 2. This is super interesting. This is where we meet wife number 1, okay? Moses' wife number 1. Numbers 12, 1 and 2. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman who had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. It says it's twice, and it's for effect. It's like, did you know he got a speeding ticket? I can't believe he got a speeding ticket. Did you know he got fired? I can't believe he got fired. Did you know he married this Cushite woman? I can't believe he married the Cushite woman. It's this like, oh, the verb is feminine singular. So Miriam is the one here who's really digging in. She's the one who's speaking against Moses, not so much Aaron, but and then the whole leprosy thing happens. But anyway, so who are the Cushites? Okay, a Cushite woman. Now, Midian, this is where he went, and he was a shepherd for 40 years. He marries Zipporah. That's here. The Cushite kingdom is way south. My point is, they're different women. Moses has 2 wives. They're not the same woman, okay? This is the kingdom of Cush. It's modern Ethiopia. So as I talk today, sometimes I'll say Ethiopia, sometimes I'll say Cush, same place, okay? So that's the first thing we need to understand. The second thing is anytime, and you're in the Old Testament, and you read Ethiopia or Cush, it is a dark-skinned, black people. So now we're starting to look at Miriam's freak-out factor. It's racism. Because it wasn't unusual for people to have, it wasn't what God wanted, but it wasn't unusual for people to have 2 wives. Like everybody has 2 wives. So that's not why Miriam is freaking out. It wasn't even that this Cushite woman was from a different country, because Zipporah was from a different country. That was, again, maybe not wise, but it's not. But Miriam is freaking out because racism. I can't believe you married her. Black African. Jeremiah 13:23. Can the Cushi, Ethiopian Cushite, change his skin color or leopard his spots? So they're just known for being dark. That's just how it works, okay? So that's where they are. That's where she's from. Now, when did Moses marry her? This is where it gets really fun. There are a whole bunch. Let me just read them to you. My sources here for this are Josephus, Eusebius of Caesarea, Irenaeus, Herodotus, Clement of Alexandria, and Pliny the Elder. So this is, we're not making this stuff up. So when Moses was 30 years old, as you already know, he was a military general for Egypt, and Cush from the south was invading into Egypt, and Cush was very powerful militarily. And they go in, and they go all the way up to the Mediterranean Sea. They could have crushed and conquered Egypt, but their mentality was just to plunder. They didn't want to take over. They went in there and they stole statues, sarcophagi, all this stuff. And that's why I read also that way down in Cush, archaeologists have found in these tombs all this random Egyptian hardware. And they're like, what's going on? And that's why. They just want the stuff. And they left. Anyway, so Moses, as Cush is coming up here, Moses is a general, and he stops their offensive campaign, and he turns it around into an Egyptian offensive campaign and pushes them back. And so he gets down to Cush. There's their capital city. It's called Saba. Yeah, Saba. And it was impregnable. It was surrounded by water, and there was sand all around it. And in the sand, they had placed these horned serpents. And this is what Josephus says. First off, you want to see the horned serpent? Here it is. Yeah, right? And so this is from a video. These serpents sit on the sand, and they wiggle, and then they just disappear in the sand. So they're you're running through there. And so this is what Josephus says. These horned vipers ascend out of the ground unseen and also fly in the air and so come upon men unaware. And so the whole royal city of Saba is surrounded by these things. You can't get there. You can't attack it. And so Moses is concerned. But Moses, in his Egyptian wisdom, understands that there's a bird, a special bird, the ibis. It's kind of like a pelican with a long black beak, who feed on these snakes. And so he crates up hundreds of these ibis birds, goes down there, lets them loose, and these ibis birds go around, eat all the snakes, and then he goes in and attacks the city. It's just great, right? Actually, I spent hours because I'm so fascinated, but there's no real record before this date of the Egyptians venerating the ibis bird, and I'm wondering if this situation with Moses as a general and using the ibis wisdom, this might be the beginning of them venerating the ibis bird. And so this is what I'm talking about. This is the sacred ibis bird, and if you ever see a guy with a bird head, that's Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom. Anyway, maybe there's a connection, maybe not, but this is the bird we're talking about, long black beak that would eat the horned vipers, okay? Okay, so, and now I'm going to read to you from history, Josephus. So Moses is attacking, the city's going to fall, and if you're the royal family, you're dead. You just know. You can see what's going on. We're no longer impregnable, and so Tharbis is the name of the princess of Cush. Tharbis, the daughter of the king of Cush, happened to see Moses as he led the army near the wall, fought with great courage, admiring the subtlety of his undertakings and believing him to be the author of the Egyptian success, which he was. She fell deeply in love with him. Upon the prevalence of that passion, she sent to him the most faithful of her servants to discourse with him about their marriage and surrender. Thereupon, he accepted the offer on the condition she would procure delivering up the city, and gave her the assurance of his oath to take her as his wife. When that had once taken possession of the city, he would not break his oath. He married her, took her back to Egypt, and gave thanks to God. And that's, Josephus, you got like a 70%, trust. You know what I mean? So the whole love thing, whatever, it's probably just, I don't want to die. But anyway, that's what he says. Okay, so here's a picture of Tharbis. All right, actual security cam footage I was able to hack into. But anyway, so that's Tharbis. And so here's how the story goes. So then he's in Egypt with her, and everything's fine until that one day when he visits his brethren, sees a Jew being oppressed, and kills the Egyptian. He leaves in 5 minutes. Abandoning her, she's like, what happened to Moses? And she's like, oh no. So she runs back to home, Cush. She's like, I'm out of here. And so Moses is off in Midian for 40 years, marries Zipporah. Does he ever tell Zipporah about this? Probably not, because this is the whole former life. Like, I am just going to be in Midian forever. I'm going to be a shepherd, and now you're my new wife. And pro tip, if you've ever been married before, tell your wife. I'm just saying, it seems to be a common courtesy. Anyway. Okay, so then the Exodus happens. They're leaving. Now, this is international news, Egypt's troubles and all this. And so the Israelites, they're Hebrews of this people, but they leave and they're wandering in the wilderness. Tharbis, she goes up to find Moses because, hey, Egypt is struggling and you're able to be somebody that I think you used to be. And so she finds them in the wilderness at a town called Hazeroth. They meet there, okay? But before Tharbis shows up, Zipporah and Jethro, remember, they came back because, he converted. So now you've got Jethro and Zipporah and Moses together, and then out of the blue, she walks up, I'm Moses' wife. Imagine you're eating today at Jason's Deli. It's a great place. And you're having a good lunch, and then some woman walks in, and the woman is like, honey, I'm your wife. And you're like, I think I'm going to go to the salad bar for a bit. Anyway, awkward, right? Awkward. Plus, she's black. And so Miriam is just like, I can't believe you're doing this. And so, anyway, so she finds him. Was Tharbis shocked to see her former military prince of Egypt in shepherd's clothes with a bunch of, escaped convicts? Like Zipporah and Tharbis knew two completely different Moseses, right? I mean, she knows the military general, the rich, the prince, and Zipporah, all she knows is just the guy, he can take care of the sheep and he knows how to survive in the wilderness, okay? Anyway, okay, so at this point, Numbers 12, Miriam speaks against the black skin is the problem. Seems to be racism. I'm going to go on a bunny trail here, just got a couple minutes. Does race exist? The answer is no. Just 3 quotes over here. I'm going to read it to you. This is from a magazine called Scientific American. More and more scientists find the differences that set us apart are cultural, not racial. Some even say that the word race should be abandoned because it's meaningless. So what science is saying is that race is a sociological construct, not a biological one. We're all the human race, and here's another one. Race is a social construct derived from perceptions conditioned by events of history, has no basis in biological reality, and curiously enough, Americans kind of made it. Last one, racial characteristics make up only 0.2% of 2 people in the world. We are remarkably similar. Obviously, we have different features and stuff, but they're not racial differences, just feature differences. So anyway, race is something that triggered Miriam, and it triggers us. I mean, our culture, it is a hot, hot button. And so, how much like Miriam are we? When something like that happens, what's our first instinct? Our first question, our first assumption? Oh, well, they moved in and they're this way, and I wonder, you know what I mean? And that just breaks the heart of God because he died for the world, everybody. And he loves differences, and we want to make everyone the same. Someone's across, oh, you're different. He loves that. Look at nature. How many shades of green do we really need? It's just differences. He loves differences. And so we want to be challenged by that. And then here's the thing. How are you informing your mind, your emotions, and your will with racism? Because our culture is forming your mind, your emotions, and will. And if we don't get in there and build a theology of unconditional grace-based race theology, we're going to probably be swept by the culture, okay? So heads up with that. So that was the first complaint. I can't believe she married a Cushite. She married a Cushite. Okay, that was the thing. Number 2, they said in verse 2, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken to? We're so tired of you, Moses. You're always bossing us around. Can't the Lord speak through us? And then the Lord unpacks on them and says, hey, if there was a prophet, I speak to him in a vision and dream, but Moses, he's special. I speak to Moses face to face. He beholds my form. That's unique, okay? So basically the Lord is like, yeah, I speak through Moses. Deal with it, okay? That's the thing. And then verse 3, this is interesting. Verse 3. Well, okay, verse 3. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all the people on the face of the earth. This verse is just awkward. So, I'm into context. We want to let context drive things. Like in the context here, what does this have to do with humility? There's nothing in humility at all, okay? Complaining forms the structure. They're complaining about leaving Egypt. We don't have water, don't have food. Moses wants to die. Just the chapter before this, Moses said to the Lord, what have I done wrong? How come I haven't found favor? Did I conceive these people? Where am I going to get meat? I can't get meat. And then listen to this. I'm not able to carry these people alone. The burden's too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, kill me at once. Moses is feeling the pressure here. Now, in Hebrew, time for a little textual Hebrew criticism. In the Hebrew text, first off, the Hebrew text, there's no vowels. At first, they were just consonants. So LV, is it live or love? Well, you would just know from the context. But then later on, about 500 AD, the Masorites came in and go, you know what? Other people could get this wrong, so they put in the vowels as forms of dots underneath the consonants to help people out. But sometimes they got them wrong, but they have lots of different copies and stuff. But anytime they're doing a textual copy thing and they see, yeah, I see what happened here. Somebody got it wrong, the wrong word. They would never, ever change the text because they revere the text. But they would just put a note in the margin. And that's called kathiv kare. Kathiv, here we go. Kathiv is what is written, but kare, in the margin, all the Jews will go, yeah, I know it's written here, but because of these problems, this is what we read. This is the word that should be there, but we're not going to change it because we revere it. So, look at this example. The text might say, Moses is homesick today. Okay? Except in the margin, many manuscripts would say, no, he's homesick. Whole different meaning. Is he home thrown up, or is he longing to go back to home? You see, you didn't even change a letter. You just changed a space. So they would leave the text the same. It would say, oh, he's homesick, he's thrown up. But in the margin, they're like, yeah, no, actually, he's longing to go. That's how it works, okay? In this verse, what I'm saying here, the man Moses is very humble. The word humble is actually miserable. The only Hebrew difference is a little yod. See that little yod? That little comma there, that yod, that changes the word, and there's a bunch of manuscripts that follow the miserable thing. So they make a note, yeah, we read humble, but it should be miserable. And you look at the context, everything checks off the buttons with miserable. He wants to die. He can't handle this. Okay, anyway, so he's very miserable. And plus, you don't say the most humble more than any person. Are there degrees of humility that you can compare with other people? It just doesn't even make sense. Anyway, okay, another thing he does is he gives away the 2.5 tribes. Now, this is the promised land. Notice right to the right of the Jordan, which would be east. East of the Jordan is not the promised land. Now, if you study the Old Testament, you know that Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh are over in that area, and they shouldn't be. It's not the promised land. You study all the passages, that's not. So Moses gives these people to him. I'm going to go fast here, just kind of paint a picture. why are Reuben, Gad, and a bunch of Manasseh over here? Because Moses gave it to them. Just follow me. It's too many words. The land the Lord gave you, that's west. Moses gave you the land beyond the Jordan. Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. Moses gave you the Reubenites, Gads. And this is the book of Joshua, all right? I got 3 slides here. Moses gave them beyond the Jordan. Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave to them. Moses gave an inheritance to Reuben. Moses gave an inheritance. God doesn't do this. Joshua certainly doesn't do it. Moses does. This is the last slide here. Reuben, Gad, Manasseh, Moses gave it to them. Moses gave you the land beyond the Jordan. Moses gave a possession. Anyway, Joshua gets the baton of leadership from Moses, and here it's a mess. Moses makes a huge leadership blunder in capitulating to the request of the 2.5 tribes. They should not have been over there. Come over the river, even though it's just kind of like a ditch, breaks the tribes up. The Assyrians come in later, wipe everybody out. It was just a mistake with a lot of consequences. And Joshua, I think it's interesting, in his book, he goes to this isn't even all of them. He goes to great lengths to explain he's the leader, but Moses gave you all that land. I didn't do that. Moses did that. God gave us this land, but Moses gave you. I think it's funny. It's kind of like, okay, I get it. Anyway, so that was a huge mistake. So my point here, the big zoom out picture, as we grow in faith, we will make mistakes. We will fall short. We will just be really, really dumb at times. And then Moses dies. All the way down at the end of Deuteronomy 34. And this is sad because this is the Lord takes him to Mount Nebo, not in the land, and he says, look at the land I swore to your forefathers. This is the land I'm going to give them, but you cannot go. You shall not go. Why is that? Because a simple matter of him hitting the rock. You remember that? And maybe you've wondered about the difference. Well, here in Exodus 17, he strikes the rock and they get water. Well, that's a miracle. You don't normally hit a rock and get, but you do in different parts. This is solid granite here. This is a different geological area, and I want to show you a Bedouin trick that Moses would have known. Okay, God said, speak to the rock, but he gets angry, and he says, listen to me, you rebels. Shall we bring forth water? See, I'm full of wisdom. I'm a big shot. I'm exceptional, extraordinary, and so I can do this for you. This is the deal. This is a cross-section of the wilderness of Zin. So you have the surface. You have soft chalk. When rain would fall, the water would percolate down, hit a hard limestone layer, and it would flow downhill whichever way. And it was so arid and so dry, I think I've shown this to you before, that it would form an effusion point, and it would evaporate, leaving this crust. Bedouin shepherds today know how to take their staff, spot these things, whack them, and then the water that's built up behind that effusion crusty point trickles out. Not enough to feed 1 million people, but certainly a couple sheep, okay? And so it's very possible that when Moses is here and God says, speak to the rock, he's like, no, I know what to do. I'm going to do my shepherd wisdom, and I'm going to take care of these people. And so it's that same thing about he's extraordinary again, and God is like, I want you to show the people that I am powerful. I will take care of them. Moses robs them. He robs God of his glory. He robs the people of a lesson of following him. And so that's why God says, I can't let you go in the promised land. If you go in the promised land, you are formally teaching the people you do not have to obey God, and there's no consequences. And God's like, that ain't happening. So when I think of Moses, one word I think about is just consequences. 2.5 tribes, consequences for hundreds of years. Consequence, can't go in. It's just a lot of consequences. And as you and I go on our faith journey, we have dead ends and detours, and we have consequences. Sometimes those stick with us our entire lives, and sometimes God can redeem those, and many times they're just painful, and we have to figure out what God's lesson there is for us. But we don't want to go into the shame and regret and stay in bed all day, okay? So the last thing that's weird here is in the middle of an obituary, in Moses' obituary, Deuteronomy 34, Moses died, all this. And Joshua is full of the spirit of wisdom. And Moses. Have you ever noticed that? Read Deuteronomy 34 and just ask yourself, what am I supposed to do with this praising Moses in the middle of an obituary? I was just at a funeral a couple weeks ago in Lincoln. How weird would it be if the funeral is for Claudine, a friend of ours. Claudine is this and left these kids and stuff, and Susie is really patient. And Claudine, you're like, Yeah, that's what's going on here. Anyway, it's super weird, okay? Okay, wrapping it up. God does not run away from runaways. They're transformed when they grow in faith and godly wisdom, and that path is never smooth, never easy. Sometimes God has to deconstruct some things that we have let into our minds, into our emotions, and our will. He wants to take us from extraordinary to ordinary, and then He can become extraordinary through us. Our eyes are on Him, not ourselves, all right? So, Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, see the salvation of the Lord, be silent." And so our questions today are, if God takes you from extraordinary to ordinary, if God leads you into the wilderness, if God leads you into a dead end, if you make unwise decisions and complain, which we do, will we together fear not, stand still and trust Him, and look and wait for His salvation, and just be quiet? And that's hard. But that's what we want to do. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for your goodness and your grace. Thank you for the invitation to replace our fear with faith in you. Thank you for being big enough to handle our fear, complaining. Thank you for the invitation to replace our frantic activity with calm, still faith and patience. For changing the vision we have of our impending disaster to a vision of your salvation and deliverance. For the challenge of quieting our complaining and using our silence and our stillness as worship and strong statements of faith. We pray that you would honor that and you would show yourselves powerful in the many examples of that we all have going on in our lives. Amen.